what we're witnessing is Israel and the United States losing a war, and losing decisively. The United States and Israel always had the ability to put bombs on target, to make things go boom. That was unquestioned. They have some of the finest technology in the world. It's not. It doesn't take a military genius to make things go boom. But what's clear now, what is it? We're at day 17 or something like that. The things that are going boom aren't doing what they're supposed to do, which means retarding or degrading, diminishing the Iranian capacity to wage war. The Iranians have been prepared for everything we're doing. They're one step ahead of us the entire time. I will wager money. I don't have much, but I'll wager money on the fact that we haven't destroyed anything of significance in Iran. We were telegraphing this war for some time now. When I was a weapons inspector in Iraq, it came on the aftermath of Desert Storm, and I fought in the Desert Storm. I played a role in the targeting and battle damage assessment. I know how we would, because I was the guy that did it. You'd examine the strike imagery and you'd see, does destruction criteria met? Do we have a hole in the corner of the building where we wanted a hole to be? Yes, we do. Do we have evidence of secondary blast? Yes, we do. And we checked it all off and said, we killed everything. And then as a weapons inspector, I went to Iraq and inspected all the buildings that we blew up during Desert Storm, saying that we destroyed it, only to find that there was nothing in those buildings. They had all been evacuated beforehand. And the Iraqis brought it back. And I was told by an Iraqi general, he said, Scott, Mr. Scott, they always like to call me Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott, you Americans are really good at blowing up buildings. You're really good at it. And he said, and we're really good at pouring concrete. The difference is when you blew up a building, there's nothing in it. And when our concrete cures, we put the stuff back in and we're back in business. You didn't stop anything. And that's what's happening in Iran right now. If you think for a second that they left their high value production equipment inside known production facilities after the United States was saying that there was a potential of war, we're moving aircraft carriers, we're moving airplanes in. If you think that's what happened, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you. I'll give you a good rate, but you're still going to buy it because it belongs to me, because you'll believe anything. These are empty buildings. So we're not achieving the result. That means that Iran's recovery from this conflict will be much quicker than anybody believes. They just have to build buildings. But what's inside the buildings, the expensive stuff, is being preserved in one of over 120 different hide sites that they've constructed inside the mountains. The Firdos underground nuclear enrichment facility that Trump bombed during Operation Midnight Hammer in June originally wasn't designed to hold centrifuge cascades. It was a hide site. They just basically went and carved out inside a mountain, and they had these standby hide sites in case of a war where they would take material and hide it in there. It was one of, like I said, 120, and there are probably more that were constructed for this purpose, each one of which is linked to a facility that is linked to assigned trucks that are designed to grab this stuff and bring it to that facility. Maybe we know where one or two of these are, and we're collapsing tunnels. That's the catchphrase. We're collapsing tunnels. Okay, so we collapse a tunnel that has production equipment inside. Production equipment's still there. Someday the tunnel will be actually the production equipment. We're not doing what we think we're doing. We're definitely not stopping their ballistic missiles from being launched, because they're launching them every day to great effect. So this campaign that we designed is achieving nothing except establishing that we are war criminals. Not only the assassination of Ali Khamenei on day one, first 6 missiles, that is murder, by the way. Well, you see, Scott, he's a legitimate command and control target, only if we have a legitimate war going on. Who declared war? Not Congress. They've punted on this one. The president, did he get the Security Council of the United Nations to pass a Chapter 7 resolution? And I know all the naysayers are, Scott, come on, it's the Constitution. I hate to educate Americans on the Constitution because I'd like to believe that they are intimately familiar with it. But the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution says that when we sign a treaty, a president signs a treaty, and the Senate has ratified the treaty by more than 2/3, becomes the supreme law of the land. You may not like that. I don't care. It's the Constitution, the Supremacy Clause, the supreme law of the land. That means that the United Nations Charter is the supreme law of the land, bound to us by the Constitution. And the Charter prohibits what we're doing right now. The only time we can go to war, according to the Charter, is if we were attacked by Iran. I'll get to that in a minute. or if the Security Council deems that there is an imminent threat to international peace and security that can't be resolved through diplomatic intervention, they will authorize the use of military force. That's what we did during Desert Storm. We had authority from the United Nations to build a coalition to liberate Kuwait from Iraqi invaders. And we also had permission from Congress. They met 4 days, I think, before the bombing began and passed a resolution saying we authorized the president to enforce the Chapter 7 resolution. Here, the president has made some sort of weak claim about the necessity of preemption. The problem is he can't give his story straight, because he was told us from the very beginning that the Iranians were going to hit us. They were going to strike us first, and we had to strike them first. Well, the Pentagon went to Congress and said that's not the truth. The Iranians were never going to attack us first. They were prepared to respond if we attacked them, but there was never an imminent threat of a preemptive Iranian attack. And so that argument falls apart. But even then, what is the threat? Nuclear. We hear that. J.D. Vance just said it in the White House. It's a nuclear threat, except we know that it isn't a nuclear threat. How? First of all, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, briefed the United States Congress last year and said there is no Iranian nuclear weapons program. She's the honcho, number one. There's nobody above her in the intelligence world. This is the consensus assessment of the community. And the president said, she's wrong. I'm getting my intelligence elsewhere, from Israel. Again, for all the Americans out there, that should get in your craw, because our intelligence said there is none. The Israeli intelligence said, and I will tell you, somebody who's followed Israeli intelligence for some time, we know that in 2004, the Israelis submitted fabricated documents to the International Atomic Energy Agency accusing the Iranians of having a nuclear weapons program. Forged. The Israelis forged them. They seem to believe that we forgot about that, because in 2018, they once again briefed President Trump on newly discovered documents. And when people like me went through them, we went, it's the same document you tried to sell us in 2004. You've just repackaged the lie. But this time they had a president who was willing to nod his head yes, so we got out of the Iran nuclear deal. But we know that there is no nuclear weapon program. We know that. How? Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner have said so. Now, they thought they were condemning Iran, because they said, well, the first thing the Iranians told us is that they have 450 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium hexafluoride. They were threatening us with the potential of a bomb. And I'm like, no. They were telling you that they don't have a bomb. You see, because that's the totality of the 60% enriched uranium that the IAEA said existed before the June bombing began. What they're saying is we haven't converted any of it. It's all here. All you have to do is send in inspectors to verify, and we're going to work with you to get those inspectors in. So the Iranians weren't saying we have a bomb or threatened a bomb. They were saying we can prove to you that there isn't a bomb. And they were able to do that. So if this process is taking place, you immediately do away with the imminent threat. There is no imminent threat. Negotiation. There is no legal justification for what we're doing in Iran today. This puts us on the same page with other nations. For instance, go to the Nuremberg trials. Justice Jackson, who was the lead prosecutor, accused the Nazis at Nuremberg trial of war of aggression. In fact, they were all charged with that, and several of them were hung by the neck until dead for the war of aggression. Why? Because a war of aggression is the supreme war crime. From the war of aggression, all other crimes take place. We have now committed an illegal war of aggression. We don't have Security Council authority. We don't have congressional authority. We don't have even moral authority. This is a pure act of aggression, which means, gosh, we're sort of on the same page with those awful people that were hung by the neck until they were dead in Nuremberg. That's not a book that we want the American name in. And yet that's where we are today. At least win the war. I mean, you're an American. At least win the war. Do that right. We're losing this war. Now, I'm pleased. I mean, I hate to say this because I don't wish harm on anything, but this is not a war we should be winning. This is a war that is destabilizing to the, he wanted to bring, one of the reasons why he's doing this is because Israel told him to do it. So right off the bat, we as Americans have to say, no, we don't work for Israel. Apparently we do. We take orders from Benjamin Netanyahu. We go to war on his behalf. But he also wanted to basically bring Iran's head with him to China. He was supposed to go to China next month. And he wanted to bring Venezuela head and Iran's head and throw it on the table in front of Xi Jinping and say, I am Donald Trump, the conqueror. You must kneel before me and quiver in fear. Well, Trump just said, I'm not going to China right now. We're going to delay it. It's going to be delayed a long time. Why? Because he would go there as a fool, an idiot, a loser. And the worst thing is, this was all predictable. Donald Trump can sit there and say, as he does now, no one ever thought they would close the Strait of Hormuz. He could say, no one ever thought they would strike American bases. He said that. We never thought they would strike American bases. He would say, we didn't think that their government would last. And we didn't think they had this many missiles and that to be able to fire this way. Well, that's just a straight up lie. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff briefed the president on the JCS assessment, which was that the Iranians will close the Strait of Hormuz, and there's nothing America can do about it. So we have to anticipate that closure. If you want to free that, then you got to mobilize around 150, 200,000 troops who have to come in and seize that. But without those troops and the ability to project that power forward, the Strait of Hormuz will be closed. He was also told that we're going to run out of defensive interceptors. And then we'll be defenseless in the face of Iranians who will not run out of missiles. They will hit every target, Israel, and all of our bases. He was told this by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was told everything. Now, today he's pretending I wasn't told anything. Worse, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, commissioned an intelligence assessment from the National Intelligence Council that said, you won't achieve regime change. If you kill Ali Khamenei, all you do is rally the nation around, that there is no chance of regime change. She talked about the dangers to the global economy. Basically, everything that happened was told to the president before he made the decision, that we're going to lose this war, lose it decisively, that we lack the capacity to win this, that all of our goals and objectives are unachievable.
Yeah.
And he went to war. Yeah.
No. I mean, this is a fantastic insight. And, for our interviews, I just like to give you the floor and get your insights. I mean, these are incredible. And this is the stuff that is not published on mainstream media. This is why we have to do these interviews. And I want to ask you a question, about the missiles that Iran has, because no one understands, the missiles and the warfare as good as you do. So when we look at Iran's missile arsenal, the ballistic missiles, hypersonics, drone swarms, how capable is Iran moving forward and, in order to continue their counterattack?
The Iranians started their missile business during the Iran-Iraq war. The Iraqis had Russian-made Scud missiles that they were firing into Iranian cities. So the Iranians went to Libya and then to Syria to acquire, I think actually Syria first, then Libya, to acquire their own Scud missile capabilities. And then when those venues shut down, they went to North Korea and got the North Korean, version of the Scud. But they basically purchased these missiles and they developed their own missile force. Over the years, they've expanded their missiles, improved it. They've reverse engineered. The Iranians are some of the most capable engineers you're ever going to meet. I remember when I was talking to IAEA inspectors about the Iranian nuclear program, the one guy said, Scott, what you have to understand is, we're dealing with a cadre of nuclear scientists, all of whom are educated to the highest possible standards. Iran has the highest percentage of peer-reviewed PhD theses in the nuclear field than any other nation in the world. Peer-reviewed. That doesn't mean inside Iran. That means put out there in Europe, the United States, where all the prominent people are reviewing it, and these guys are coming back and passing their, their qualifications. These are the best scientists in the world, literally, and so when they reverse engineer this stuff, they immediately look at how to improve it, the function of a liquid engine, how to improve guidance and control, how to streamline the airframe, all this sort of stuff. And over the years, they built, a new missile, then another missile, and each one's better. And then they get into a situation where they have to potentially go to war with Israel. So, they're about the fourth generation of missile. They go, let's build a lot of these. And they did. 20 years ago, they built a whole bunch of a certain kind of a liquid fuel missile. And then they upgraded that. They moved into solid rocket propellant. They moved into maneuvering warheads. They started to there. But when this war started, the Iranians simply fired those 20-year-old missiles. They saturated the air defense systems. And many of those missiles got through. But people are like, why aren't they sustaining the launch rate? Because they don't want these missiles. These are just basically to get us to fire off all of our high value ballistic missile interceptors. What they want are the missiles they have now. Solid rocket fuel, which means it's fast. A liquid fuel engine. Now the Iranians have developed their fuel so that they can actually load it up, and it's treated like a cartridge of ammunition. But once you put that fuel in, you either have to drain the fuel and refurbish the missile, or you have to use it. And so, if they think there's going to be a crisis, they're going to pre-fuel these missiles as rounds of ammunition, which means they now will just go get loaded on the launcher, taken, launched, lifted, and fired. In the past, what you'd have to do is bring an empty missile out, load it up with oxidizer, load it up with the fuel. That takes time. You're sitting in the open. You can be shot, and then you launch and you fire. But now they've gone around with that. But solid means you don't have to fuel it at all. You just bring it out and shoot it. 2 stages, longer distance. They have worked on new warheads. Their warheads use decoys. People should really take a time to look at the light show that's in the sky and try to parse it out, because what you can see is a missile coming in and then releasing a bus. The bus has the warhead and the decoys, and you can see the decoys deploy, and you can look at how the purpose of the decoys, because watch what happens when the decoys deploy. They deploy forward and they get brighter. And all of the the Iron Dome comes up and starts intercepting them. And then they start to release other warheads now. And then what happens, they release them at a specific speed. So the first wave of interceptors have been taken out by the decoys. Now they release the actual warheads. And the next wave of interceptors come up and they get an intercept solution. And then these warheads accelerate in. So the interceptor's coming and trying to get them, and the missile goes, and boom, 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 hits the target. They've got other ones that start maneuvering early on, coming in, and you can watch this maneuver. It doesn't have to maneuver. It's not like, NASCAR Indy 500, dramatic move.
Right.
An intercept solution is precision. It's a bullet hitting a bullet. All you have to do is get off just enough so that the bullet misses. And it's a very elegant, you can see it coming in, slight S turns. And then, because we can only see 2-dimension on the screen, we don't get to see what it's doing laterally, but it's coming in, it's making these maneuvers that literally weave through the interceptors, and then they come in, orient, bam, and hit the target. The guidance systems they're using are amazing, because everybody's like, oh, they're going to steal Western technology. We can just shut them down. If they use GPS, they figured out how to use GPS to a point, but they also have stellar navigation. They also have their own terrain mapping navigation, what we use with the cruise missile. They have a variety of navigation systems they use for these warheads, and these warheads are hitting everything they're aimed at. And they have developed warheads for different targeting problems. So if they need to collapse a hardened aircraft shelter, they have a warhead for that. If they need to collapse a command and control bunker, they have a warhead for that. If they need a pinpoint strike against an office building here where the intelligence guys, they have a warhead for that. So they literally have this whole menu of missiles today. And basically they get up and they look at it and say, what targets are we hitting today? Boom, 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 boom. Okay. This missile goes here. This missile goes here. This missile goes here. This missile goes here. Fire, launch. And every day they do that all over again. These are some of the most advanced, technological missiles out there. The Oreshnik is something. The Iranians have a version of the Oreshnik. It's not quite as the warhead's not quite as big, but it is a warhead that comes in at hypersonic speeds, releases, and then has these submunitions get released to saturate and devastate an area. The Iranians have one of the most advanced ballistic missile programs in the entire world. And we are so far behind the 8 ball. Just a quick reminder to people, the Patriot 3 missile system out there isn't shooting anything down. It shot down some of the old missiles, but it's a system that's linked to 1970s technology.
Wow.
Study the history of the Patriot. It used to be, they did something called, I think, Nike Hercules, and the Sprint and Spartan missile system, the radars that were used for that. And Raytheon and everybody built these things at great expense, but then we did away. We signed the ABM treaty, said we're not going to do this. They're like, well, what do we do? We got all this technology. What do we do? Well, somebody went to the Army and said, why don't you ask us to build a battlefield missile interceptor? The Army went, oh, okay, we're going to ask you. They said, oh, well, we'll take this technology and we'll adapt it. So understand, we've taken technology from the 70s and we started adapting it. Now, that means that this technology from the 70s is designed to shoot down missiles from the 70s. Now we're adapting it. As we adapt it, the missiles get better. So now we've built a system that can't shoot down the missiles that exist today. So then we go into a cycle of software upgrades, and we start upgrading the software. And that's what happened during the Gulf War. The Gulf War, we were always behind. We were one software application behind the crude missiles that the Iraqis were firing. We never really got it right. We didn't shoot down any, that were fired against Saudi Arabia, and maybe none against Israel. There's some people think we might have got the Israelis might have got one or two, but out of 49, that's not enough. The Russians have built new missile technology that's specifically designed to defeat not only Patriot but THAAD and any future missile defense system. We're out there. So when people talk about the Golden Dome and all that, it won't work. It's already been defeated. There is no missile defense shield out there. There never will be a missile defense shield because there will always be a weapon designed to build it. Now, it's not just the Russians and the Chinese that build these advanced weapons, though. North Koreans do. Now the Iranians do. The Iranians have some of the finest weapon systems ever designed, and they're designed to defeat American missile defense systems, which means there's nothing we can do to defend ourselves, even though we just robbed South Korea of 5 THAAD radars, which basically means that South Korea is literally blind. We're bringing them to where? To the Gulf Arab states who desperately need. No. They're on their own. We're going to bring it to Israel. And all that's going to happen is the Iranians will find out where those 5 are, and they'll destroy them like they destroyed the others.
Right. Yeah, Scott, I mean, your insights here are just absolutely incredible because this is the kind of stuff that, again, we just don't hear in the media. And I mean, like you had mentioned earlier, Donald Trump was briefed on this. He decided to act by his own merit and just said, look, we're going to go ahead and launch this war. And I think what we're seeing now is we're really seeing this spiral into a much bigger regional conflict here. I want you to highlight that because one of the things that Donald Trump has now admitted is he said, we had no idea that they could respond and knock out these THAAD programs like you had just mentioned. We didn't think that they would strike the other Gulf countries. We look at a city like Dubai, a beacon of safety for 40 plus years, pretty much ruined overnight, and that illusion of safety is now gone. Talk about more the regional conflict and how this could potentially spread and continue to spread throughout the entire Middle East.
Well, the first thing we have to understand is that Iran has not attacked any nation that hasn't attacked Iran. Now you'll say, wait a minute, Scott, it's the Americans and the Israelis that are attacking. Why are they hitting the Gulf Arab states? Every Gulf Arab state they're hitting has played host to an American military base that has been involved directly or peripherally in the ongoing attacks against Iran. For instance, Al Udeid used to be packed full of airplanes, and all the airplanes left, and everybody's like, "Why are they hitting Al Udeid? There's nothing there." Well, they had a $1.1 billion radar whose whole sole job was to detect Iranian missile launches and send that data back to the Missile Defense Shield, therefore allowing quicker queuing times, better targeting solutions, etc. The Iranians took that out. They took out other communication hubs. Why? Because they were part of the conflict. There's no innocent party here. Bahrain has been involved. Kuwait has been involved. Saudi Arabia has been. I mean, the Saudi Arabians are very duplicitous. They're trying to pretend that they have nothing to do with this. But it's interesting that when they make a transponder mistake, suddenly we find that the Saudi airspace is full of F-16 and F-15s and KC-135 tankers and they're all landing at a given Saudi base, which is now being struck. The Saudis were up to here in this war. Everybody's up to here in this war. They're all providing bases and military support, which makes them active parties to the conflict, and the Iranians are targeting them, and in many cases punishing them. The United Arab Emirates will never be the same. It will never be the same. It may collapse, but these are governments that don't deserve to continue, and the Iranians are calling them out and saying, you supported military action against us. And so they're winning. They're destroying the economies of these countries. They're forcing them to shut down energy production, which will have a resonating effect, a calamity on the global energy markets that has yet to properly manifest itself, but it's coming soon.
Absolutely.
But then there's also Israel. Israel is part of this. Israel's getting pounded. And then, the United States, our bases are also, being hit because they're American bases, not just, bases in the Middle East. The Iranians had all this targeted in advance, and they told the director of national intelligence told the president that these are the targets that the Iranians are going to hit, and there's nothing we can do to stop them because we don't have sufficient missile defense capability. So this was all known by the president before he pulled the trigger.
Scott, I want to be respectful of your time. I know we've got a limited time together today, but I wanted to talk about, where do we go from here? Because I think it's largely understood now that Donald Trump is desperately looking for an exit ramp. Many people are saying he's going to simply declare a victory, pull his troops out, much like he did in Yemen. Where do you see the president going from here? And what is kind of the next future steps for the United States? I think he grossly underestimated Iran, as you've just pointed out in today's interview, as far as their capabilities and how they could respond. What is Donald Trump's next move? And where do you think the United States goes from here?
Well, we know that he's made outreach to Russia, and that Steve Witkoff, who is his lead negotiator with Russia, met earlier this week in Miami with Kirill Dmitriev, which is Vladimir Putin's designated interface with Russian interface with Witkoff. Why? What would they be talking about? And the answer is a grand bargain, I believe. I think Russia is the key to bringing this conflict to an end, because Russia, together with China, can, if the conditions are right, probably get Iran to agree to stopping this conflict. But the conditions have to be right, which means I think the United States is going to have to accept inevitability that we aren't welcome in the Middle East anymore, and our infrastructure has been destroyed. We can't just simply fall in on the bases because the bases are destroyed, or the relationships with the host nation are destroyed, and that we have to leave. So I think it's very likely that what you'll see is a phased, comprehensive withdrawal plan to get American troops out of the Middle East. Russia will help broker that with the Iranians. There'll be some level of verification involved in that. But the idea is to get us brought down to as close to zero military presence in the region as possible. The Iranians will insist on lifting of sanctions in their totality. And they will insist on, being able to keep their ballistic missile capabilities, because it's a conventional capability and it proved its worth in gold. Nobody can argue that this was frivolous or superfluous. This was a necessary military capability that helped Iran defeat the United States. Iran will probably have to give up a couple things. In addition, they'll probably have to put their nuclear program back on the table. The deal that was brokered by the Omani government right before the bombs fell, it's probably a deal that the United States will have to accept. And basically it says that, they will be withdrawing from the nuclear deal. The United States will accept the nuclear deal. It says Iran will close all access, all paths to a nuclear weapon. And we'll accept that. That's a good deal. President can sell. So what I think we're going to see is a con man do his thing. I think you're going to see the president say, I won the war. It's over. Right. We won. We inflicted unprecedented damage. We sunk their fleet. We did everything. He'll not address the issue of ballistic missiles. He'll say Iran will, of course, be allowed to, defend itself as it sees fit without a nuclear weapon. We've closed down that pathway, and it wouldn't have happened. He could make up any lie he wants to. That wouldn't have happened without this war. So this war was necessary to do that. And then he'll say, I am the greatest peacekeeper that ever walked the face of the earth, because now that I have won the war in Iran, and we've shut down their nuclear program, there's really no reason for us to maintain this very high-profile military mission in the Middle East. So we're going to withdraw back to Fortress America, which is what I promised in my national security strategy. So he can spin this thing in a way that makes it look like this was part of a master plan. Right. Unfortunately, I think it means that Cuba's probably going to have to get its head cut off, because the president needs a win. Right now, he desperately needs a win. He can't roll into the midterm elections with what is clearly a loss on his record, no matter how he spins it. But that loss can be mitigated by the fact that it really didn't impact the United States directly. Gas prices went up, et cetera, but that can't be stabilized. Cuba, on the other hand, if he's able to through the Cuba, for the American people in the lead up to the midterm elections, this is a big deal. Yeah. You win the state of Florida right off the bat. And you're going to win a lot of other states, because now you'll have accomplished what no other president could, the removal of the Cuban regime. So I do think there's the potential for a grand bargain here that Russia can broker with the assistance of China. Is it a guarantee that that's the way it's going to go? Of course not.
Right.
But I believe that's the direction we're heading. I've listened to every word the president has said. I'm looking for clues, and the clues are that he's going to be declaring victory.
Right.
How he defines that victory is another thing. But he'll declare victory, and then I think he's going to, rather than double down and reinforce the positions of the United States in the region, I think he's going to withdraw us and get us out and say, I am the peacekeeper. I did this. I created peace. I achieved this result, and we're done. So that's what I see happening.
Yeah. Scott, thank you so much for your time today. Just one final thing is, where can we follow your work? And do you have a YouTube channel that we can follow, a Substack? Let our viewers out there know where they can follow your brilliant work.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the compliment. You can go to scottritter.com. It takes you to my Substack page. And on there, you'll see across the top, there's banners. So I have my YouTube channel there. I have different podcasts that I do and stuff. And it also will educate you about some of the projects where I'm working on. For instance, I'm leaving for Russia on Friday. And, we just talked about this grand bargain. I'll be meeting with very influential Russians to discuss this very issue. So my goal is to plant a kernel of thought in the minds of the Russian elite to maybe help facilitate this. Because to me, as an American, I need this war to end. This is bad for us. If the Russians can help us bring it into the war, that's great. I'm also, we speak of conflict resolution. I'll be going to Chechnya and trying to capture what it is that happened between the Chechens and the Russians that allowed them to go from two wars where they hated each other to where they are today, close allies, working closer together. What happened that allowed this to happen? What is the Chechen miracle? How do you define it? How do you package it? Because we're going to need something like that in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, and we're going to need it between the United States and Iran. We're going to need conflict resolution models that we can draw upon. And so one of my goals and objectives in this trip is to that model. So if people go to the Substack, you'll see there's a donation page. I'm an independent journalist, and the only way I get to do this is through the donations of people. And if you think this work's important, feel free to hit the donate button. It will be all expended in a good cause.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, I want to say thank you so much for your hard work, and I'm just so grateful for the chance to interview you and to bring this to our channel so that more Americans and more people around the world can get these insights. And for everybody watching, we're going to put the links down to Scott's website and all of his work that he's doing. We're going to put that in the links for you down below that you can easily follow along. Scott, thank you so much. Wish you safe travels to Russia and a great mission forward. I agree. I mean, you and I are both United States citizens. We certainly want the best for our country, but we're also very passionate about speaking the truth and calling out, the BS when we see it. And hopefully this does result in some change. So everyone, thank you for making it to this point of the video. Thanks for spending time with us, and we look forward to our next interview soon.